offices, hotels, and other commercial activity. And then half of it was going to be for a new city of residences in the city. It's been 50 years, and that project is still being executed. In the 70s and 80s, the offices and hotels were built between Michigan Avenue and Columbus Drive. And since the 1980s, the residential activities have been built, and there are still somewhere between 7 and 9 building pads available for additional apartment and condominium buildings. Well, I hope it comes into view. I want to talk about the third tallest building in Chicago. We've seen the first two. The Willis Tower is number 1 at about 1,450 feet. Trump is number 2 at about 1,500 feet. No, not 1,500, about 1,300 feet. And the Aon building is number 3, about 1,100 feet. The Aon building is a very thin white building, which you can't see at all, I'm sorry. But the interesting thing about it is it was built as the corporate headquarters in 1973 for Standard Oil of Indiana. And the guy who designed it should have known better because his name was Edward Durrell Stone. He clads the building in Carrara marble, very thinly cut, not realizing that with our harsh summers and our harsh windows, that Carrara marble is not going to survive. And sure enough, 15 years after the building was built, at a cost of $120 million, it had to be stripped and reclad in granite at a cost of $80 million. I think in a moment we might get a glimpse of it. Well, it's not coming into view. Can you see the stripe, the building with the colored stripes in it? Some of you at least. That is the new GEMS World Academy. It's a private school K through 12. It's going to open this September for 600 students. It's an example of the fact that young families are staying in the city. Designed by BKL Architects. The building that has the solid portion on it is the Coast. I'm not going to talk about that building, but I want to use it as an identifier because you can see that there's a building that comes out on a triangular direction. That is the Swiss Hotel from 1988 by Harry Weiss. Once again, his love of the triangle served his client. We've all been in hotels with long rectangular corridors. They're kind of boring. But if you're in that hotel, the corridors are very small because they come off the central core. And 3 little corridors give access to all the rooms. But more importantly, he knew that building was going to be surrounded by other buildings. You take a triangle, put it on a square block. The triangular facades will always have access to natural light. And so the residents or the guests of that hotel are happy with that. Well, we're missing a couple of buildings. I apologize. And let's go back to the Trump, although you're going to have trouble seeing some of what I'm going to talk about on that as well. Adrian Smith knew that when he was given the commission to design that building, it was quite an honor for 2 reasons. The Trump building is on one of the most unusual sites in Chicago. We're sitting on the river. As we look straight ahead, it looks like that building's sitting in the middle of the river. And that's because that's the one place the river bends south. Similarly, Wabash Avenue, which goes to the west of the building, bends as it crosses the river. So this building has a very unique vantage point. Smith also realized that he was being asked to design a building that was going to fit into the neighborhood where all these great historical architects and architectural works had been created. And so he tried to relate to the city through symbolism. The color of the building, if you remember when we start, was a blue glass, symbolic of the lake and the sky. Of course, the river is green, so it's not symbolic of that. The gray bands that you see are strategically placed to pay respect to 3 of the great architects whose buildings we have seen. As we come out underneath the Columbus Drive Bridge, the lowest set of gray bands are roughly the height of the base of the Wrigley Building, so he's paying respect to Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White. Second set of gray bands are roughly the height of Marina City, his way of paying respect to Bertrand Goldberg. And the third set are roughly the height of that Mies van der Rohe black metal and glass building, now the AMA Plaza. So he's tipped his hat, if you will, to all 3 of those architects. But the structural engineer also has credit for those gray bands because the way that building stands up, is the same way you or I stand up if we're on snow skis. The elevator cores are 4 feet thick concrete walls. It's like our torso. Those great big columns I pointed out are the ski poles that you hold in order to get your balance. And the arms are great big concrete arms inside those gray bands. Like your arm, larger at the shoulder, smaller at the wrist. Those arms are 17 feet when they leave the core, smaller when they grab hold of the column. That engineering structural technique is exactly the same way the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, stands up. Also designed by Bill Baker. By the way, Baker of Skidmore, Owings & Merrill is